Testing. Without it. So tear your eyes away. Oh, tear your eyes. Every little thing that you're lusting for. Every little thing that you're lusting for. How did you ever get along before? I bet that you were fine without it. Oh, tear your eyes away. Oh, tear your eyes away. Before you're tripping on the jump and lights scattered on the floor. The dusty in the sky towards the night anymore. Everyone you have to have soul. Satisfy your greedy high for now and never. Forever, forever. Every little thing that catches your eye. Every little thing, oh, that catches your eye. Gets under your skin and it won't be denied. Well, I bet that you'll be fine without it. Oh, I bet that you'll be fine without it. I bet that you'll be fine. Every little thing you think that you need. Every little thing you think that you need. Every little thing that's just feeding your greed. Oh, I bet that you'll be fine without it. Every little thing that you gotta have. Every little thing that you gotta have. You gotta reach for, and you gotta grab. Oh, I bet that you'll be fine without it. So tear your eyes away. Oh, tear your eyes away. Every little thing that sparkles and shines. Every little thing that sparkles and shines. It's driving you sweetly out of your mind. But I bet that you'll be fine without it. So tear your eyes away. Oh, take your eyes. Every little thing that you're lusting for. Every little thing that you're lusting for. How did you ever get along before? I bet that you were thing that catches your eye. Every little thing, oh, that catches your eye. Gets under your skin and it won't be denied. Well, I bet that you will find without. Oh, I bet that you will find without it. I bet that you will find. Every little.
I'm sorry?
Do you have any announcements?
No, do you?
So you want to just
No. Yeah, I guess so. We'll give, is it 7 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and start. Well, somebody canceled my class last week. Wasn't me. Anyway, here we are. After I made such a big deal about everybody being here. Oh well. So where are the prayers? Who's my say? Christy, are you going to be the 34? It's probably the same prayers. Well, heck, this is the first time we're doing it, so yeah, it doesn't matter. Actually, it depends. Sometimes, if you do a retreat, every session you'll go through this, all of these prayers, and you go, and this is a big, for me anyway, all these prayers, I thought, this isn't nonsense. I don't have time for this. I want to get down to meditate. But anyway, Lama Yeshe used to say, he's the man who needs braces back here over here on the left. Anyway, he was the kind of the grandfather of the FPMT, this organization, and he used to say, look, if you're going to meditate, did I say this one other time? Anyway, he said if you're going to meditate an hour, it's probably better to spend 58 minutes doing prayers and 2 minutes of meditation. If that's what it takes to get your motivation straight. In other words, the whole fruit of the practice depends on your motive, your motivation, your intention. So it's important to get that straight, and these prayers are helpful. And they are, I will say, anyway, you have to find out for yourself. If you do a retreat, if you ever get a chance to do a retreat, and I would strongly encourage people to do retreats when you get a chance. That's how you make progress. Most of us here at Kadampa Center, please don't take this wrong, but we're dabblers. You know, we dabble. It's very difficult to get these teachings to go deep and transform our mind. Dabbling. It really takes concerted effort over time, putting your mind in a position like a retreat where you're training. And then, as Lama Yeshe said, and I think Gunaratna said it too, somebody asked him, when does he meditate? And he says, 24/7. His whole life's a meditation. Wouldn't that be great? Well, at least we can start out in the morning with 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Gradually, as I said, most important time is when we get up off the cushion. Can we bring that mindfulness, the recollection, the things that we've learned on the meditation cushion or in the chair, can we bring that into our day-to-day lives? Okay, so here we are. Refuge and bodhicitta. Remember 4 measurables. The first one, again, may you have happiness in the cause of happiness. That is not love. That's the definition of love. Love is a non-conceptual experience, isn't it? It's not the words. May you be free from suffering, and the causes of suffering is the definition of compassion, but it's not compassion. Compassion is the feeling, the experience that, if it could speak, would actually say these words. You know, when you see your only child is suffering, or somebody you dearly love is suffering, all you think you don't say, may you be free of suffering and its causes, but you just want them to be free of suffering. You feel that. That's a visceral experience. That's compassion. May all beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering, is joy, and then may all beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. That's equanimity. So immeasurable equanimity, immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable joy, and immeasurable equanimity. Anyway, let's start with refuge prayer. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, Buddha, Dharma, and Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. And may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time. Rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence. Turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha fill and offer it. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Radna Mandala Kame Yatayami. Okay, so we're going to start out by doing, remember the 9-round breathing technique? So you, those of you, anybody brand new tonight? Brand new. Okay. Well, welcome. So just, you can hang in there with us. This is not that complicated. You breathe in through your right nostril and out your left 3 times. And then you'll breathe in your left and out your right 3 times. And then in both nostrils and out both nostrils 3 times. So you do this on your own, just to kind of calm down, bring the mind to one-pointedness. Hello? Yeah. When you breathe in, you mentally, just softly, mentally say breath. and breathe out and mentally say breath. But also you really want to pay attention to the sensation of the breath wherever you've chosen to watch it, at the tip of the nose, the rising and falling of the chest or the abdomen. But we're choosing to use the breath as the focus. So you do that, and remember what I said last time. You may only get like 1 or 2 breaths before your mind just goes off, right? And when you recognize that you're not following the breath like we talked about, and it may take you 5 minutes before you realize that you're not watching your breath. You're not doing it, mindfully. You go, not breath, okay? And because that's a distraction, then you bring your mind back to the breath, in and out, very, just be very precise. We call this, what's the word, single-pointed concentration, or concentration meditation, or calm abiding. Usually you hear people say one-pointed meditation, but that's the point. The point is to rein the mind in, to tie it to this object called the breath with the rope of mindfulness. And do not lose the breath even for a millisecond. Just make sure you're following the complete inhalation, and then that slight pause where you turn to begin the exhalation, and then at the end of exhalation, that pause that you have right before inhalation. Don't keep your mind, completely focused on the experience of breathing. And when you're distracted, which you will be, you just, without being critical or like beating yourself up, because we haven't been trained to do this. This is new territory for many of us. And just bring it back. Be compassionate with yourself. Beat yourself up for not being perfect. Remember to sit upright and do not move your body. Sit perfectly still. So depending on who you read, in which tradition you're talking about, there are two types of meditation. Some people say three types of meditation. But for us beginners, this is the place to start, is to develop some concentration, some ability to focus, to bring the mind and focus it on one object. I was talking to Geshe-la the other night, and he was talking about it, and he says it's like a wild elephant, our mind, right? And if you tie a wild elephant to a post, like a big one, of course, with a rope, the rope being mindfulness, first of all, the elephant's going to tug and go this way and that way. It's going to be wild, and it's really going to struggle to get away because it's not used to being subdued. But gradually, after some time, then the elephant, and aka our mind, will then settle down. As we discipline it more and more and bring it back again and again, it gradually begins to be subdued. Then you can train that elephant. But before that, no, not a chance. So another kind of meditation that we did last week and we'll do right now is we talk about it in Tibetan Buddhism as this. We basically talk about two kinds. This concentration practice, or this the Sanskrit word is shamatha, or calm abiding. And the mind is calmly resting on an object when it's fully developed. Calm abiding takes a lot of effort to do that, but it can be done, and so the mind can literally be stable for hours and hours and hours, and the mind really alert. We're not talking about anything fuzzy going on here. So that's something that we can practice to cultivate. Then there's the other kind of meditation that we call analytical meditation, which I don't always like. I think you could call it contemplative meditation. I think it's probably, it's something like even in church. In those of you who come from Christian tradition, you might read a stanza out of the Bible, and then just think about the meaning of the words, right? Well, it's not that much different here, but for example, when we meditate to develop compassion, we don't meditate on compassion. We actually transform the mind into compassion through different kinds of reflections. Then when we have that experience, remember I said the words are not the experience of compassion, that if that experience, that feeling could speak, it would say, may you be free of suffering. But it's that experience is what we're going for. Right? So we cultivate that experience. We transform the mind into compassion, and then it sounds weird. We say we meditate compassion. We don't meditate on it. We meditate compassion. But once the mind's transformed into compassion, and you have that experience, you hold the mind there, using your ability to concentrate on that experience as long as you can, then of course the mind, is going to take off at some point. You're going to be distracted, and you can go back and think about different things that helped you cultivate compassion in the first place until you come back to that experience, and then you hold it. Again, no more discursive thought here, just the experience of compassion. And that's how we can take the words and literally transform our heart through this type of combining analytical meditation with placement meditation or fixed meditation. So why don't we do a little taste of this? And first of all, there are a couple of things I can say about compassion. Is that to truly, the kind of compassion we're talking about is not just, it's not just for the ones that you're near or dear. Those are pretty easy to develop compassion for. But this is for universal beings. And so we're not going to spend a lot of time tonight, but we did last time, where we want to develop sort of an equanimous attitude toward the three categories of beings: the friends, the strangers, and the people we dislike, also known as enemies. So the people we're attached to, the people we feel indifference toward, and the people we feel aversion toward. We need if we're going to have universal compassion, it has to be not only for the ones that are near and dear, but for the so-called enemies and the strangers. So start out with equanimity. And then it's impossible to develop, if you hate well, let's put it this way. If you dislike somebody, you cannot have compassion for them. You have to at least have this equanimous attitude. Because if you see somebody suffering that you dislike, you're likely to rejoice. It probably would make you happy, or might be a little kind of, yeah. That's not what we're shooting for. We're shooting for this more universal, compassionate attitude. So what I want you to think is these two things. First is love, and then compassion. But these are words, but we need to, and we'll start out with the words, and that's a good place to start. May you be free. First of all is love, okay? Because remember, if you don't like them, you cannot wish them. You can't have compassion for people you dislike. So we start out with people we like usually. May you have happiness and its causes, and may you be free of suffering and its causes. May you have happiness and its causes. May you be free of suffering and its causes. So start out with yourself. And if you want to, sometimes it's really helpful to go back and imagine yourself when you were a little kid, particularly maybe when you were having a hard time. And think repeating these words silently to yourself. May you have happiness in its causes. May you be free of suffering in its causes. you say the words, try to add a little feeling to it, sincerity. May you have happiness and its causes. May you be free of suffering and its causes. And now switch to someone that you care about deeply. And notice how easy it is to wish them happiness and its causes, and to be free of suffering and its causes. And again, your mind's going to take off on tangents. You just bring it back to the practice. And now take somebody that's sort of a faceless person, a stranger, somebody that you basically feel indifference toward, but understanding that they too want to be happy and don't want to suffer. They're just like us in that really important way. So we wish them, may they have happiness and its causes. May you be free of suffering and its causes. And this person is the vast majority of living beings are strangers to us. So he or she's representing all of those strangers. Again, trying to develop some feeling, just not mouthing, like even though we're saying the word silently to ourselves, try to make some effort to develop some feeling behind the words. lastly, pick somebody, imagine somebody in front of you that you feel aversion toward. Your mind has resistance to. And we do the same thing, same word. Again, these so-called enemies, objects of aversion, dislike, that's a living being just like us, and they want to be happy and they don't want to suffer, but maybe not so skillful. Maybe they're not that skillful, but that's what they want. And those relationships are impermanent. Sometimes enemies or these people could become our friends. Just a few kind words, some gesture, apology. So we can't get too attached to labels here. We want to, as much as possible, sincerely wish this being to be happy. May you have happiness in its causes and be free of suffering in its causes. Again, we're this one's the hardest one to do, of course, and yet it's probably the most important one because anger, resentment, grudges, all of that stuff, it's like us drinking poison, expecting the other person to die. It's crazy. Why should we poison our mind with this crap? So we need to develop loving kindness and compassion to these to these really difficult beings. Sometimes we'll add a little analysis to help us get into it with this difficult being. We talked about some of these things last time, but the so-called enemy, the person that we feel aversion toward, again, changeable. Relationships changeable. They're just like us. They want to be happy. They don't want to suffer. And for the people here who are open to past lifetimes, we talk about how in past lifetimes everyone has been like family. Everyone's been as kind to us as even our mother of this lifetime. Just this lifetime looks different, but the continuity of their consciousness in past lifetimes was like our mom, extremely kind to us. But we forget. But we don't recognize them now. But something to think about. And the reason that they appear to us as an enemy is just our own karmic appearance, based on our own former unskillful actions. So as one great Buddhist saint, Shantideva, said, if somebody hits you with a stick, you don't get mad at the stick, right? You get upset at the person. In the same way, this person who has said things that you don't like, and therefore you label them as enemy or object of aversion. It's only because we've done things in the past to them. Now that karma is coming full circle. The real demon, the real enemy is not that person. That person's like the stick. The real demon is selfish, self-cherishing, egocentric mind that dwells right in the center of our chest. It's our heart mind, selfish mind. That creates all the negative karma, that creates all these karmic appearances of enemies. And furthermore, who teaches us patience? Not our friends. That's why they're our friends, right? Because they say nice things. The beings that teach us patience are those that push our buttons. And they're so generous that way. And they point out our faults. They point out areas of where we need to work on ourselves. So that's incredibly kind of them to point out our flaws. And they give us the opportunity to develop patient endurance and tolerance. Without that, there's no possibility of happiness. No possibility of having peace and tranquility. So we think sometimes we have to back away, do this kind of analysis, and then we go back and look at this so-called enemy. And now we go back to, may you be happy and have the causes of happiness, and may you be free of suffering and the causes. See if you can bring some feeling to it now where maybe you couldn't before. So this came out in Scientific American. I know I've held on to this magazine for years. 2014, 5 years ago, November 2014, Scientific American on meditation, and they did PET scan. Anybody know what PET scans are? These special imaging scans of the brain, and they could show. I know you can't see this, but anyway, certain areas of the brain would light up when you were distracted, and then when your mind was focused, certain areas would light up. And when you were meditating on compassion, for example, certain parts of the brain would light up, and they would compare, they usually often would take novice meditators and teach them one technique and then teach them another technique, and they could show differences. But they came, they said they came up with 3 kinds of meditation. They talked about focused attention, which is what we were doing when we were watching the breath, right? And then mindfulness. Sometimes, Gunaratna, he calls it vipassana. And it just means insight meditation. But it is kind of an analytical meditation. And then the other kind of meditation they talked about was loving kindness and compassion, which we just did. So this is interesting. I'm not going to read this. I usually read it, but maybe I will some of it. But what they did, one of the studies that they did was they did it on these were on novices, so they hadn't had any experience, and they had this one group meditate on empathy. Now, I always define compassion as empathy. Feeling, what is empathy? Anybody got a definition? Anybody got a Webster in their brain? What is it? Hello? Pardon? Yeah. Say it again for the hundreds of people that are watching at home. Okay, 5.
Experiencing sympathy or feeling their pain as if it's your pain.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's sort of feeling with, isn't it? So they, this one group, I don't know how they did this, but anyway, they taught them a particular type of contemplative meditation to develop empathy. And they had another group that they basically did this practice to develop compassion that we just did. And the people that developed empathy, what do you think happened? Like when you're sitting there and let's say your only child is like got a big laceration that needs to be repaired, and the doctor's coming in there, squirting all kinds of medicine in there, and the child is screaming and stuff like that. And you're feeling empathy. How is that? What do you think? What's going on?
Painful.
It's distressful, isn't it?
Yes.
It's distressful. So they actually found that these people who they had taught empathy meditations to, they said that, and I'll try to read it here. Now I'm going to read it. I said I wouldn't, but here we go. According to the Buddhist contemplative tradition from which this practice is derived, compassion, far from far from leading to distress and discouragement, reinforces an inner balance, a strength of mind, and a courageous determination to help those who suffer. And then they go on to talk about, all right, to further explore the mechanisms of empathy and compassion, they divided these 60 volunteers into 2 groups. One meditated on love and compassion. The other experimental regimen trained participants to cultivate feelings of empathy for others. Preliminary results showed that after a week of meditation-based loving kindness and compassion, novice subjects watched video clips showing suffering people with more positive and benevolent feelings. The other subjects, who devoted a week to an experimental regimen that cultivated empathy, experienced emotions that resonated deeply with others' suffering. But these emotions also have brought about negative feelings and thoughts, and this group experienced more distress, sometimes to the point of not being able to control their emotions. Aware of these destabilizing effects, these two investigators added training for the empathy group in compassion and loving kindness. They then observed that this additional exercise counterbalanced the detrimental effect of training in empathy alone. Negative emotions diminished and positive emotions increased. These results were accompanied by corresponding changes in the area of the brain, and blah, 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 and how they did the PET scan. But they talk about, like in the healthcare profession, in the giving professions, the service professions like that, the burnout rate is like 60%. Can you imagine? Because, and they call it empathy burnout, because, people are involved in dealing with suffering people, and they're not, again, we're making a distinction here. Now, I'm inviting you to check it out for yourself. This is like everything else here. You don't believe it, you check it out. But what we're talking about is developing compassion, not just the empathy, because apparently, based on the data, anyway, and based on these studies and scans and stuff, empathy may not be as helpful as we think it is. Compassion, definitely helpful. So that's what we wanted to cultivate. All right, so don't really, that's pretty self-explanatory. If you want to read this article, you go to Scientific American, November 2014, and you can pull it up somewhere. All right, so now we're going to spend the next 22 minutes listening to somebody else besides me. Get me off the hook here. Now this guy is reading the book, but I'm going to write down notes about things that I think are interesting, worthy of discussion, and we'll see how it goes. But this is, I love this book. We got partway through this last time. Hang on. If this doesn't work again, I'm going to be so disappointed.
Chapter 1. Meditation. Why bother? Meditation is not easy. It takes time and it
Is this
takes
okay?
energy.
In the back?
It also takes grit, determination, and discipline. It requires a host of personal qualities that we normally regard as unpleasant and like to avoid whenever possible. We can sum up all of these qualities in the American word gumption. Meditation takes gumption. It is certainly a great deal easier just to sit back and watch television. So why bother? you have to clear the trees and pull out the stumps. Then you till the soil and fertilize it, sow your seed, and harvest your crops. To cultivate your mind, first you have to clear out the various irritants that are in the way. Pull them right out by the root so that they won't grow back. Then you fertilize. You pump energy and discipline into the mental center. Then you sow the seed and harvest your crops of faith, morality, mindfulness, and wisdom. Faith and morality, by the way, have a special meaning in this context. Buddhism does not advocate faith in the sense of believing something because it is written in a book, attributed to a prophet, or taught to you by some authority figure. The meaning of faith here is closer to confidence. It is knowing that something is true because you have seen it work, because you have observed that very thing within yourself. In the same way, morality is not a ritualistic obedience to a code of behavior imposed by an external authority. It is rather a healthy habit pattern that you have consciously and voluntarily chosen to impose upon yourself because you recognize its superiority to your present behavior. The purpose of meditation is personal transformation. The you that goes in one side of the meditation experience is not the same you that comes out the other side. Meditation changes your character by a process of sensitization, by making you deeply aware of your own thoughts, words, and deeds. Your arrogance evaporates, and your antagonism dries up. Your mind becomes still and calm, and your life smooths out. Thus, meditation, properly performed, prepares you to meet the ups and downs of existence. It reduces your tension, fear, and worry. Restlessness recedes, and passion moderates. Things begin to fall into place, and your life becomes a glide instead of a struggle. All of this happens through understanding. Meditation sharpens your concentration and your thinking power. Then, piece by piece, your own subconscious motors and mechanics become clear. Your intuition sharpens. The precision of your thought increases, and gradually you come to a direct knowledge of things as they really are, without prejudice, without illusion. So are these reasons enough to bother? Scarcely. These are just promises on paper. There is only one way you will ever know if meditation is worth the effort. Learn to do it right, and do it. See for yourself. Audible Studios presents Mindfulness in Plain English, written by Bhante Gunaratne.
Okay. So I took a few notes here. Any comments, questions? Anybody depressed? Is this a depressing message or is this an optimistic message? What did you hear?
Kind of ran on the depressive side a lot.
He did.
It seems to describe dukkha over and over and over again. Over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm. But then he recovered, right?
Sometimes.
Yeah. Any comment? Anybody? This is free for all.
I like the definition of faith and morality as opposed to, it seemed more spiritual than just religious dogmatism. Faith is something that you've experienced for yourself, so you know that it's true. Mm-hmm. And morality as a set of concepts that you, regard as superior because of that experience in faith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I heard him say too, and I think that's the Buddhist message is that now I'm not going to say this across the board, but in this particular class, I mean, things like past lifetimes and all that's interesting, and you may or may not, it may or may not resonate with you, but the kinds of things that we're talking about, the main things that Gunaratha's, that the Buddha is talking about are verifiable through our own experience. So he called it, I think he used the word confidence. You get confidence because, hey, you see it. You know, you rescue yourself when you get angry, when you notice that you're angry, and then you bring a little mindfulness to that moment, and you notice that it's impermanent. You don't react. You just sit there, and it you know, gradually changes, and then you can breathe again, and you're back in the moment, and you're free, and you're not a slave to that anger that had you a moment earlier. And you go, wow, this works. So that's the kind of, the faith is based on our own personal experience. And the Buddha, when he taught, of course I wasn't around 2,500 years ago, but he said, come and see for yourself. He said, this is an invitation. This may not be your cup of tea, but come check it out for yourself. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, move on. Find something else. But he really invited people. And as Gunaratha said, all of this, I don't think this is hard to see for me personally. I think it all made a lot of sense. But he's saying, particularly the meditation piece, it's just a bunch of hype. You do not have to believe it. The only way you or I will ever know if this works is if we practice it. Then it becomes real. But without practice and without meditation, practice, and I'm not talking about dabbling 10 minutes a day for, 6 weeks. Forget it. I'm sorry. But, the seeds will be planted for the next life, maybe, if there is one. But to really get the benefit of it takes concerted effort over time. Well, they say moderate effort over time. That's the way you need to go about it. Don't, I've seen so many people who, come to the center, they just get fired up, and then 2 months later you never see them again. They disappear because they just burned out, or 6 months later, or a year later, something like that. So moderate effort over time. Good, yeah. And the morality thing, I think, is an outgrowth of just being aware that, for example, certain attitudes like anger, it hurts us, and then it causes us to say and do things that harm not only us but other people. It's destructive. And just through the being aware of how destructive it is, morality just kind of naturally follows. That we stop doing stuff that things that hurt us and others. Actually, when we hurt others, it does hurt us, doesn't it? So yeah. Anything else?
This is just expounding in a kind of a left-hand turn off of the benefits of meditation and where he goes into some of that. But somebody gave me an article, and I thought that you would be the perfect person to ask about this, about how long-term meditation can also help with your different things like blood pressure. And I know because of your particular background, I wondered if you had ever experienced testing other meditators' blood pressure.
Well, I do tell people to meditate, lose weight, exercise, cut back on your salt, and if you're brave enough, you might want to learn how to meditate. I actually told some guy today that. It was, but I'm always, you give them meditation, you give them medication too, and you go, take this while you're learning how to meditate. Maybe we can take it away later on. But yeah, it does work. I mean, Herbert Benson, back in the late 70s, he was a cardiologist at Harvard, wrote the book, which really was the beginning of bringing science. He was big into transcendental meditation, I think, and he wrote this book called The Relaxation Response. And then he did a bunch of scientific experiments on people and, you know, just proving the benefits of meditation. I can remember one in particular where now somebody who's read that book, you can argue, well, you can, you know, disagree with me and you'll probably be right, but I think this is the way as I recall, they showed these videos. They had these two groups of people, one group that were meditators, another group that weren't, and they showed them a video of a, you know, in a shop where there's a table saw, and some guy ends up cutting a finger or a couple of fingers off. This really happened too, right? So the people who saw this video, I mean, and were not meditators, their immediate response was like, you know, like, yikes. And he was measuring temperature, pulse, blood pressure, a bunch of different parameters and stuff. And it took them forever. You know, it took them much longer to get back down to baseline. Okay? The response was appropriate, but physiologically they were a mess for a while. Then the meditators also, yikes, you know, which is the right response. But they more quickly came back to a baseline and stayed there. So this was done in the late 70s, Herbert Benson. So yeah, that has huge implications, and to the degree that you think that anxiety and stress and all the stuff that goes on in our minds is destroying our health, I don't think there's much doubt about it. And so, you know, now we can fix it, honestly. I mean, medicines are helpful. I'm not poo-pooing Prozac, or if we need it, we need it. But also we can, there was a nice article in Tricycle magazine which came out many years ago. It was a Buddhist, it said, "Meditating on Prozac." That was the title of the article. I thought, that's pretty good. You know, you do what you have to do. If you're if we're so, you know, upset and rattled and we need a little bit of help to calm us down so we can start the practice, and then maybe over time as possible to you know, to get off medication. And you know, I think most people, a friend of mine who's a psychiatrist said one of the biggest mistakes that primary care physicians make is they put people on antidepressants and think they have to stay on them forever. And it's not true. Many people can be taken off medicine, but I think that there's some dangers in meditation too. There's no free lunch, right? But generally speaking, it's a safe practice. Nothing in life is perfectly safe, but if you have issues with anxiety and depression, this can help. This can really, really help. That much I know. Anybody else have any other thoughts about my notes? Yeah.
Sure. I like the statement really resonated with me when he said to cultivate your mind. And of course, my monkey mind goes off on a tangent there.
Mm-hmm.
But I picture that to be cultivating and farming to be kind of the antithesis of our culture today, which is really we tend to just want, give me the top 3 or the top 10 list, give me a couple bullet points, I'm going to become a Buddhist, and then I'll find Zen, and I'll do that, you know, this month.
Mm-hmm.
And I can move on to Nirvana maybe next month.
Yeah.
You know, and as opposed to cultivation, as opposed to farming. I mean, 100 years ago, you couldn't cram farming in. You couldn't procrastinate and put it off for months and months, and then decide, you know, maybe I'll start sowing my crops in December. It's not going to work that way. So I like that visualization of cultivating kind of a slow, gentle, constant movement in that direction,
Right.
and that helps me to kind of redefine what my goals are, is that it's going to be.
I had, we're almost ready to, almost done for the night, but I had an experience many years ago. I think it was like 85 or something like this. I was in Thailand, and there was this at a Wat. I don't know if people know Thailand, but anyway, it was up in the northeastern part of Thailand called Ubon Province, and there was a monk who was he was actually ethnically Japanese, but he spoke perfect English, and he was in a monastery that was for Ajahn Chah's students, and they were all Westerners, and there were like 30 or 40 monks, and most of them had been monks. I mean, monks for like 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I couldn't believe it. I mean, there was incredible commitment to the practice. And this one monk had just spent 3 years in solitary retreat. Now, I'm not saying, I'm not trying to make anybody feel like you have to do this, but I was impressed that he had done this. He had been in they call it a kuti, which is basically like a little house on stilts. It's not very big. It's probably from here to the wall square. All it is a floor and some walls that come up part way, and then screened in area where you could stay dry when it rained. But anyway, they had put a tent over this so that he couldn't look out. But it was about this high off the ground, so breezes could get in, air could get in. And at nighttime he would do his walking meditations, or maybe he'd do some in the daytime too, but he couldn't look out. So this went on for 3 years, that's the point, without any social contact at all. And he was really trying to do this practice sincerely. And when he came out, I met him when he'd been out of retreat for just a little while. And I remember sitting down there and eating lunch with him, and I was talking to him, and I remember, just like yesterday, a fly got on his nose, and ordinarily I wanted to go over there, and just knock the fly off his face. He didn't even move. He just sat there and kept talking to me like there was nothing was happening. And I asked him, like, what was the most beneficial thing you learned in this retreat? And he said impermanence. He said impermanence. Ta-da! Impermanence. But not just, we're talking about, but, I'm sure when we think of impermanence, we think, oh, I'm getting older, and my car's getting old. We think gross impermanence. But he's thinking subtle impermanence. The mind and the body, everything's in a constant state of flux. And we cling. This is the Buddha's, the big thing in dukkha, is that we cling. The egocentric mind clings to things, wants them to stay permanent in a world that's constantly changing. Big problem, isn't it? We're always going to suffer. He's saying that with the kinds of, Gunarat is saying, he's not being he said, this sounds depressing, but it's not. It's just reality. Let's just be honest. It's reality. Let's get in tune with reality. Things are impermanent. Yes, we're all going to get old. We're all going to get sick. We're all going to die. We're going to lose everything we have, including ourselves, but all of our friends, all of our family. Everybody's going to disappear. Nobody in this room will be here in a year, 100 years, I'm pretty sure. Hopefully, there's not a meteor hidden this way, but 100 years we'll all be gone. Everybody we know will be gone. It's all changing right now. It's changing. constantly changing. Something to think about this week. So your homework this week is to pay attention to your mind and your experiences. I'm not just talking about the thoughts that are coming and going, but the feelings that you experience in your body. It could be pain, it could be pleasure, it could be pain, it could be anxiety, it could be depression, it could be anything. Whatever it is, just pay attention to how it's changing moment to moment to moment, and just sit with it. Sit with this whole thing that this monk sat with for 3 years. And I'm telling you, he was happy. He was not depressed. He was very happy. He was not a crazy guy. Okay, so let's do the dedication prayers. What page are we going here? Help me. I like Shanti Deva's prayer. Pardon? 246. Okay. Okay. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness enjoyed by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food, may the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvest. May our medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and be freed. May the powerless find power. May people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. But thank you for your attention. Your homework this week, I didn't write anything down, but it's to continue reading in the book. Next week we're going to pay particular attention to chapter 13 in Mindfulness in Plain English, and then just to continue to read Catherine's book, Sangi Kadre's book on how to meditate. And I think for your practice this week, I really would like for you to just, again, follow your breath, and let's just stay with developing, single-pointed mind. And when your mind is distracted, bring it back. The real practice is when you come back. I mean, being mindful that you're gone and bringing your mind back is literally like doing is like a curl. We're strengthening that muscle of mindfulness. Every time we recognize that we're distracted and we bring the mind back to the breath, we're getting stronger and stronger. That wild elephant of the mind is getting it, that there's no place to go. Just stay put. So thank you for your attention.